This game show contestant is about to go down in TV history as the luckiest man in America. The year is 1984, and 35-year-old Michael Larson is appearing on the hit game show Press Your Luck. In the game, if the light comes to a stop on the dreaded whammy square, they lose all their winnings. But Larson can't seem to lose. Instead, he just keeps winning.
On May 19, 1984, an unemployed ice cream truck driver walked onto the set of Press Your Luck. He couldn't afford a birthday present for his daughter. By the end of that day, he had won $110,237. CBS executives watched the tape over and over. They searched for any rule he might have broken. They found nothing. He had simply figured out what no one else could see. But within 2 years, every penny was gone. And by 1999, he was living on the run, broke and hiding from federal agents. The man who beat the system couldn't outrun what came next, but his story didn't begin with television. It started in Lebanon, Ohio, where he was born on May 10, 1949, the youngest of 4 brothers in a quiet town placed between Cincinnati and Dayton. He was never drawn to schoolwork, but he loved finding tiny loopholes in everyday life. In middle school, he smuggled candy bars into gym class and sold them for extra money. As he got older, he opened and closed bank accounts under fake identities to collect new customer bonuses. He even registered a business under a relative's name, hired himself, then fired himself to collect unemployment checks. Between 1969 and 1982, he was arrested several times for receiving stolen goods, committing larceny by trick, and petty theft. By his early 30s, he had been married and divorced twice. His mother, Ruth, told a reporter that he was extremely smart and intense. His brother, James, was more blunt when speaking to This American Life. He said Mike never understood why anyone would work a regular job, and described him as someone who believed hard work was for fools. When he met Teresa Dinwiddie in 1983, he moved into her house even though he had no job. His claim of being a Mr. Softy ice cream truck driver during the summer was more of a dream than a reality. Teresa said he always believed he was smarter than everyone else and carried a hunger for knowledge that sometimes took over the entire room. That hunger found its home in television. One day, she walked into her living room and saw 12 televisions stacked on top of each other, all glowing at once. The heat peeled the paint off the wall, and still he sat there studying every flicker. In November 1983, he noticed Press Your Luck while scanning the screens, and the big board caught him instantly. It was an 18-square loop filled with flashing lights, cash prizes, and the cartoon whammies that wiped out everything when someone hit them. Unlike The Price is Right or Wheel of Fortune, this board looked like it might be hiding a pattern. Larson started recording 5 or 6 episodes on a VCR, which was still new technology at the time, and began watching each frame with total focus. Teresa remembered days when he would sit there for 18 hours, counting each flash around the board until he fell into something close to a trance. After 6 months, he cracked the code. The discovery was startling. The board's supposedly random spinner only used 5 patterns, a leftover decision from the show's early days when CBS didn't want to spend more money on software. Even more important, he learned that squares 4 and 8 never held a whammy. They always carried cash, plus an extra spin. In round 2, square 4 held amounts like $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000 with 1 spin attached. Square 8 held $500, $750, or $1,000 with another spin. Since the board shifted position every 0.8 seconds, he could memorize the rhythm and land on those safe squares almost every time. When he finally solved it, Teresa said he lit up like a child on Christmas and shouted that he had it again and again. Behind the scenes, the board was considered a marvel. Former CBS executive Ron Schwab once said it was the technological wonder of its era. 8 slide projectors that revealed the prizes or the whammy cartoons. Each of the 18 squares had 3 projectors behind it, giving 54 outcomes. Yet the entire system was held together by a pattern that wasn't truly random. Executive producer Bill Carruthers had begged for 12 patterns, but CBS refused because the upgrade would cost more money. He even warned the network that if they didn't add more patterns, someone would eventually memorize the board. One staff member brushed it off and joked that they would be lucky to have fans who others say by plane, but everyone agrees he arrived broke. He had so little money that he bought his dress shirt at a thrift store for 65 cents. When the producers sat him down for his contestant interview, he did not talk like a man with a secret. He told them he was an unemployed ice cream truck driver who could not even afford a birthday gift for his 6-year-old daughter Jennifer, whose birthday had been the day before taping. That story hit people right in the heart, and it made him look harmless. Yet, not everyone felt at ease. Contestant coordinator Bobby Edwards later said there was something off about him. He remembered thinking there was something about Michael that he just did not believe, that he did not trust, but he could not explain what it was. Executive producer Bill Carruthers heard the same story and felt something else. He was moved, and when Edwards raised his quiet doubts, Carruthers overruled him. The show that day was production code Now 0188, taped at Studio 33 at CBS Television City, and Larson would not be alone on stage. The other contestants were Ed Long, a Baptist minister from California, and the returning champion with $11,516 in winnings already, and Janie Littress, a dental assistant. In the green room before the taping, Janie watched Michael and a chill ran through her. She said later that Michael just seemed creepy. His smile felt wrong to her. His whole presence felt off. And she walked out of that room thinking that he had only seen it once. Michael stared at him like he was from another planet, and then quietly said he really hoped they would not have to play each other. Nobody in that room yet understood how serious he was. When the game finally started, it did not look like the beginning of a legend. During the question round, Larson buzzed in on a question about Franklin D. Roosevelt on coins and blurted out that the answer was the $50 bill. The correct answer was a dime, so he was wrong, and the moment made him look foolish, not dangerous. He finished the round with only 3 spins, while Ed had 4 and Janie had 10. On his very first spin on the big board, Larson hit a whammy on square 17 and lost everything. It seemed like his luck, and maybe his whole plan, was falling apart. In truth, that first crash became his test run. He later used it as a way to lock his internal timing to the board's actual rhythm, like a drummer trying to feel the tempo. His next 2 spins landed cleanly on square 4 and brought him $2,500. Even so, he went into round 2 in last place, which meant the pressure would be on him first when the next big spins began. Then, the second round started, and the show slipped into something no one there had ever seen. From that point on, Larson began to spin, and the board began to break. He hit one prize after another, piling up money and avoiding every whammy. The streak kept going, and soon host Peter Tomarken's cheerful voice began to change. At first he laughed and told Michael that he was on a roll. As the total climbed past $18,000, his tone shifted into nervous excitement, and he reminded Michael that the show was called Press Your Luck, then warned him on air, almost started to stare. They realized that he kept landing on the same 2 squares over and over. The pattern looked too clean. Someone picked up the phone and called Michael Brockman, the CBS head of daytime programming, obvious to her that he was hitting the same prize in the same square again and again. She said that was skill, not random chance, and not luck, and that he could aim and hit, which they had never believed was possible when they designed the board. First, everyone in the booth went very quiet. Then, the quiet broke into panic. People started shouting, "Oh my God, what do we do?" And some even turned to her asking whether they could stop the game. On stage, though, the lights kept flashing, the sounds kept ringing, and Larson kept his focus on the board. The numbers from that stretch still look unreal. From his 16th spin through his 44th, Larson landed only on squares 4 and 8 for 29 spins in a row. The full breakdown shows how exact he was. He hit square 4 a total of 24 times, which was about 55% of all his spins, and those hits alone brought him $89,500. He hit square 8 another 17 times, about 39% of his spins, for $12,500 more. The remaining money, $8,237, came from occasional hits on squares 6, 7, and 17. Meanwhile, the real danger on the big board was always the whammy, and the odds of hitting one on any given spin were roughly 1 in 6. The chance of going 45 spins in a row without hitting a single whammy works out to 5/6, or 45, which is about 0.0227%, or around 3 chances in 10,000. The game ran so long that day that the actual gameplay stretched to about 45 minutes instead of the usual 22, and the producers finally chose going. Larson himself later admitted that at around $80,000, the mental strain started to crush him, and he felt completely drained. When his total crossed $100,000, the production team ran into a new kind of problem. His score was so high that they had to alter the scoreboard, taking away the dollar sign so there would be space for another digit. The studio audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation, sensing they had just watched something that was not supposed to be possible. Peter Tomarken turned to Michael and told him that he had just reached $100,000, more than anyone had ever won in the history of game shows, and for a moment, the whole studio sat between awe and suspicion, watching a man who had turned a flashing board into a map inside his head. After 44 straight winning spins, something finally caught up with Michael Larson. His brain had been sharp all night, tracking patterns and lights, but now the fatigue settled in. Later, he said he remembered that exact moment, how drained he felt, how he suddenly realized he did not know where the whammies were anymore. So he did the one thing that seemed safe. He passed his remaining spins to Ed Long. Ed hit the button, landed on 2 whammies in a row, and lost everything he had built, almost as if the game itself was correcting the balance. Janie Littrus watched all of this and made her own quiet gamble. She wanted Larson to fall. She had seen his strange, almost impossible run, and she hoped the game would finally snap back on him too. So when it was her turn, she chose not to keep her last 3 spins. She passed all 3 to him, forcing him back into the fire he had been dancing in all night. On his 47th and final spin, Larson pressed the button a tiny fraction of a second too early. The board jumped, froze, and he landed on square 17, the very same spot where he had taken his first whammy at the start of the game. This time, though, the slide on that square showed a trip to the Bahamas worth $2,636. Larson had been aiming for the $750 plus a spin option and missed it by a hair. Only later did the full danger of that moment sink in. Square 17 did not show the same thing every time. It had 3 different slides that rotated through. The Bahamas trip, $700 plus a spin, and a whammy. That meant 1 frame earlier or 1 frame later, and he would have lost everything in one brutal flash. Instead, the board handed him a vacation and survival. Peter Tomarken tried to lighten the tension and joked that with the money Larson had already made, he could buy the Bahamas. The next day, the fun was gone. CBS executives pulled the tape and sat down to study it frame by frame, just as Larson had done alone in his living room. Almost every department head on the lot was there. People from standards and practices, legal, programming, all watching the same board, the same spins, the same man who just would not hit a whammy. One question kept bouncing around the room. How could they have let this happen? What could they do about it? And did they really have to pay this guy all that money? They desperately searched for any reason to deny the winnings. Maybe he had cheated. Maybe he had inside help. Maybe there was some obscure rule they could use. But when they stripped it all down, there was nothing. Judge Leibold Tipton, who oversaw game show controversies, finally set it out clearly. He said Larson had not broken any rules. He had played the game exactly as it had been designed. There was no rule that said he could not study the board. There was no rule that said he could not memorize patterns. There was no rule that allowed anyone to stop the game for what he was doing. He had simply beaten them at their own system. Michael Brockman, another CBS executive, put the legal reality into words. He asked what exactly was illegal about the way Larson had played. If a contestant beats the system that you yourself built, how do you deny him the money he earned? What legal ground do you stand on? Producer Robert Noah later said that Larson reminded him of a card counter at blackjack, someone who quietly watches, adds numbers in his head, and then turns the odds to his side. And as he pointed out, nowhere in the rules did it say you could not pay attention. Bob Bowden, who would later become known as a game show expert, summarized the whole affair in one simple sentence. Larson not cheated. He had just been smarter than CBS. In the control booth on taping day, Bill Carruthers had sensed it before anyone else. When the final total came up, he pulled off his headset and said, almost to himself, Larson done it. A few weeks later, with no legal way around it, Network mailed Larson his check for $110,937. On paper, the story could have ended there. Man takes on a network, wins big, and walks into a new life. In reality, the money did not stay long. After paying around $28,000 to $35,000 in federal taxes, Larson had maybe $70,000 to $90,000 left. His brother James tried to steer him toward safe ground, suggested real estate, slow growth, something that would last. Larson's mind did not work that way. He was drawn to schemes that smelled like shortcuts. Near the end of 1984, he heard about a radio contest tied to the show Sale of the Century. The prize was a jackpot in the range of $30,000 to $40,000 for anyone who could match a dollar bill's serial number to the digits announced on the air. Larson did not see a fun game. Stores and convenience stores. Only now they were piled on floors and tables. For about 2 weeks, he and his partner Teresa sat there and worked through the serial numbers by hand while the program played. He wrote, checked, and crossed off, chasing a match that never came. It was slow, boring, and physically exhausting. Eventually, he gave up. Larson took roughly $50,000 back to the bank and redeposited it. The rest of the cash stayed scattered around the house. That choice came back to haunt him at Christmas in 1984. On the night he and Teresa went to a holiday party, burglars kicked in the back door of her house. When they returned, about $50,000 in cash was gone. There was no vault, no safe, just money lying around in a home where neighbors knew a game show winner lived about his success, and word had spread the way it always does. Burglary was never solved. No one was arrested, no money was recovered, and the story froze as a police file with no ending. Larson, however, decided he knew who was to blame. He convinced himself that Teresa had arranged the theft. Once that suspicion took root, the relationship while she slept, that the way he watched her made her fear for her life. Eventually, he could not take it anymore. He grabbed her children, took $5,000 she had hidden in a dresser drawer, and fled to a hotel. In 1986, only a short time after his game show victory, Michael Larson had already burned through the money he once thought would change his life. Burglary losses hurt. Real estate bets collapsed. The rest slipped away through everyday spending. Soon, he was taking an assistant manager job at a Walmart and moving between locations in Lebanon, Dayton, Xenia, and Bellbrook, Ohio, hoping the steady work would keep him afloat. Pay felt small to him, almost like a reminder that he had flown high once. Now he was stuck on the ground again. That feeling kept growing. Truth was that the TIS American Indian Lottery did not exist at all. Pushed the idea through telephones, fax machines, and early computer networks, telling people they could buy shares in a global telephone lottery that would run using a 900 number. He even claimed the project would bring in $300,000. According to the SEC filing from March 13, 1995, scheme collected about $1,800,000, 14,000 investors, though some reports said it reached $3,000 for 20,000 victims. The problem was simple. None of it was real. SEC charged that Larson and others were selling unregistered securities, hiding the legal and technical problems that made the lottery impossible. Final judgment ordered disgorgement of $663,831 plus $46,567 and flipped out of Ohio and vanished into Apopka, Florida. His family had no clue where he had gone. When FBI agents contacted his brother James asking about his whereabouts, James could only say he didn't know because that was the truth. Before disappearing, he had one brief return to the spotlight during the 1994 excitement surrounding Robert Redford's film, His Show. He appeared on Good Morning America and spoke to TV Guide, his voice already weakened by cancer. February 16, 1999, died of throat cancer in Apopka at age 49. His family learned where he had been only when the authorities informed them of his death. He was never prosecuted for the Pleasure Time scheme. His brother later summed it up with a painful honesty, saying that winning the game show marked the beginning of his downfall because it made him believe he could trick anyone and do anything he wanted. Episodes of Press Your Luck had aired on June 8th, June 11th, 1984, and seemed to fall off the face of the earth. CBS felt so embarrassed by the whole event, they made sure the episodes would not be rerun and even added this requirement to syndication contracts. Almost 19 years, the recordings stayed locked away, never shown on networks like USA or GSN. Meanwhile, the show rushed to change the game. June 20th of that same year introduced new light patterns. September 17th, they expanded the board from 5 patterns. They also capped contestant winnings at $75,000. During all this, Larson sent a bold message to the show's contestant coordinator, saying he knew they had added new patterns, but he believed he could still beat the game and even challenge them to a tournament of champions. No one responded. Everything stayed quiet until March 16, 2003, when Game Show Network aired Big Bucks, the Press Your Luck Scandal, a 2-hour documentary that suddenly pulled him back into public view. The film became the highest-rated program in the network's 8-year history and held that record for 9 years. It brought together host Peter Tomarken, along with Ed Long and Janie Littress, and included interviews with CBS executives, staff members, Teresa Dinwiddie, and James Larson. It also carried the final recorded interview of Bill Carruthers, the show's creator, who died on March 2, 2003, just 2 weeks before the documentary aired. His early warnings about the board patterns felt almost haunting because they proved exactly right. Peter Tomarken shared his own thoughts in the film and surprised many viewers by speaking with admiration. He said that memorizing 5 patterns and picking the right one under the lights, with the pressure, the cameras, the crowd, and his own hosting presence, was incredible to witness. After that release, more shows took interest. TV Land included him in Myths and Legends in 2007. This American Life covered his story in episode 412 on July 16, 2010. GSN aired another documentary on January 14, 2018, which drew 583,000 viewers. A Spanish graphic novel came out in 2017-24, the feature film The Luckiest Man in America premiered. People still argue about what Michael Larson really was. No one else has ever managed anyone from doing what he did. Some critics and writers insist he should be seen as a kind of early hacker, someone who studied a system and exposed its weaknesses. Director Samir Oliveros even said the real scandal belonged to the executives because he believed their careless design allowed Larson to win. Others felt differently. Some described him as a folk hero with a strange charm, while others called him a huckster or even a creepy crackpot. The website Damn Interesting went further and said that his impressive run on Press Your Luck might have been the only honest day of work he ever did. Teresa Dinwiddie's feelings changed slowly through the years. In the 2003 documentary, she admitted that at one point she truly despised him for everything he put her through and for the trouble he caused in his son's life. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen how far his choices reached. And as her words settled in, it felt clear that his story held both sides at once, the thrill of breaking a system and the cost of believing you could outrun everything that followed.